Section 1. The curse of impurity. The burden of the invisible enemy. The desert, sprawling around them, did not merely lie still. It breathed like a gigantic scorching beast. The sand glittered under the sun, like molten gold or a bloody copper shield that the Lord had hung over the world to test human hearts. Every day, here was a feat of endurance. Every night, a shadow of doubt. The sand crunched underfoot, not just with the ordinary sound of steps, but with the quiet, constant complaint of a people liberated from physical slavery, yet not fully free from the spiritual bondage of Egypt. The wind, tearing through the crevices of the Sinai rocks, did not simply blow. It whispered mysterious, forgotten histories of ancient generations, reminding them how quickly grandeur turns to dust and glory to a curse. The people walked the paths laid out by God's will, striving to preserve not only their bodies from the exhausting journey, but also their souls from the Egyptian gloom that clung to their consciousness like sticky grime. Yet, in their new world, unlike the visible soldiers of Pharaoh, an invisible, more insidious danger reigned, hidden in the air, in every drop of precious water, and in the shadow that offered coolness. This was impurity, a metaphysical poison that asked no permission but seeped into the most hidden corners of existence, threatening to turn their liberation into an illusion. It resided in the careless touch, in the unrighteous desire, in the hastily consumed meat, in the suppressed malice. The elder of the tribe, an old man named Eleazar, stood on a rocky outcrop that rose above the gathered people like a ship's prow above a restless sea. His figure, though bowed by years, radiated unshakable strength, and his shadow fell upon the people as the first embodiment of the law. His eyes, deep as the Sinai caves, that remembered the fire of the encounter, sensed the slightest movement, be it the trembling of a body from fever or the agitation of a soul from a sinful thought. He saw not just thousands of faces, he saw thousands of fragile vessels filled with the gift of life, which could shatter at any moment from an internal crack. Eleazar raised his hand, covered in veins like old roots, and spoke in a voice that resonated like thunder, splitting the heated air. Listen to me, all who seek to preserve their lives, and the covenant established on the rock of Sinai. For there is an enemy who has no face and carries no weapon. It is impurity. It can ruin the heart, tear apart the community, turn a holy camp into a cursed place, and lead us to a demise worse than Egyptian slavery. The people, accustomed to the majesty of miracles, now held their breath before the face of the invisible threat. Women gripped their infants, men held the handles of their staffs, and the elders recalled stories of how quickly the Lord's wrath descended upon those who neglected his commands. Eleazar began to speak of the laws of purity, of the uneven shield, rules that became a defense against this invisible yet pervasive enemy lurking at every turn. He explained, these laws are not merely a list of prohibitions, but a complex, sophisticated system that divides cosmos from chaos, life from death, the sacred from the profane. He spoke of metaphysical hygiene, of the necessity to constantly reestablish a state of wholeness within themselves, for the smallest breach, like a microscopic crack in a vessel, could lead to the spilling of grace and the penetration of the curse. Impurity is the state of a severed connection with the sacred, and only strict adherence to the law could restore this connection, making them worthy of dwelling in the presence of the one God. The sun began to sink toward the horizon, and the shadows grew longer, but none of those present moved. Their faces bore the imprint not merely of respect, but of existential anxiety. They understood that their life in the desert was a constant, uncompromising test, where every action had not only earthly, but also heavenly consequences. Every touch, every breath, every decision made became a choice between sanctification and curse. Section 2. Principles of dietary purity. The code of life and death at the table. The following day, Eleazar spoke of the rules that touched their lives most profoundly, penetrating immediately into their daily routines and their stomachs. The laws of dietary purity. This was a lesson in responsibility, where the space of the meal became a sacred altar, and the food, not merely a means to satisfy hunger, but an act of communion with the world created by God. Behold, children of Israel, creation not as a chaotic collection of forms, but as the great book of divine hierarchy, Eleazar proclaimed. His voice sounded like an instruction emanating from the very foundation of the cosmos. Among the animals that roam the earth, choose those permitted for consumption not because they are tastier, but because they carry within them the sign of wholeness and harmony. They must be not just beasts, but symbols of order. He highlighted two signs of purity: those that chew the cud and have cloven hooves. Eleazar explained this not just as a physical trait, but as a metaphor for the spiritual path. Chewing the cud signifies constant meditation on the Word, a return to the truth for its fuller assimilation. The cloven hoof symbolizes the ability to stand at a crossroads, to distinguish the holy from the profane, not mixing light with darkness. An animal lacking these signs is a violation of form. It is unclean, for it embodies chaos and immaturity. Fish with scales and fins grant strength, for they are clean, the elder continued. Scales are a shield against the unclean depths, and fins, freedom of movement in open waters. They do not crawl in the mud and filth at the bottom, but soar in the pure element. And the animals that live on the earth must be divided. Those that chew the cud and have cloven hooves for life and blessing, the rest are forbidden, for they will bring illness and sorrow, and most importantly, they will cloud your spirit. The crowd listened with such intensity that only the whisper of the wind could be heard. This was not merely a culinary rule, it was the drama of choice played out daily. Young people felt not only respect, but also an anxiety that pierced to the bone. Every piece of bread, every morsel of meat, every drop of water now became a sacred choice between blessing and curse, between life and death. Their bodies now became the tabernacle of the covenant, and they had no right to defile it with unclean food. But the most terrifying was the rule about blood. Eleazar raised his hand, and his voice became quiet but heavy, like a granite slab. Do not touch the blood of animals, for life dwells within it, and life belongs only to the Lord. Blood is the soul of the flesh. When you shed blood, you take upon yourself an incredible responsibility, and you must allow the blood to flow into the earth as a sacrifice, as a return of life to its creator. If you touch the blood, or God forbid, consume it, you will take upon yourself the burden of another soul. You will defile your own spiritual essence, and impurity in the body will lead to impurity of the soul. A pause ensued, filled with metaphysical dread. The people felt that these laws were not just rituals, but a bloody shield guarding them from an invisible yet powerful enemy. Eliezer concluded, "And let your hands always be clean before and after eating, for this is an act of reverence for the gift of life and for the Creator who gave it. Remember, what you allow into yourselves determines what you become. Impurity from within is more dangerous than an enemy from without." The people nodded, understanding that these rules were the code of the daily war for purity in a world that sought to consume them. Section 3. Illness and Cleansing. The punishment of impurity in the path to healing. Spring arrived, but instead of the anticipated joy, it brought with it a misfortune that seeped into the camp like cold poison. During the spring heat, when the air became thick and heavy, illnesses began to spread in the settlement, more terrible than a common fever. First, it was fatigue. Then, an inexplicable spotting on the skin that grew like wildfire. People fell to the ground, their faces distorted by pain and a deep internal horror. Their eyes blazed with fever, and their bodies developed bitter sores and patches that carried not only physical agony, but also the seal of rejection. This was tzara'at, not just a disease, but the curse of impurity embodied in the flesh. Seeing this, Eleazar raised his hands to the sky, his face filled with pain and prophetic anger. "This is not merely an ailment. This is the punishment of impurity. Everyone who violates the laws of diet, who carelessly touches the body and soul of filth, who allows sin to dwell in the heart, that one will fall under the hand of illness, which is merely a visible manifestation of internal decay." He spoke of how this disease was a symbol of distance from God, a physical embodiment of spiritual defilement. The most terrible part was exile. The law was unyielding. The one afflicted with tzara'at had to leave the camp. Their voice and their presence became a threat to the whole nation. These people walked away, covered in ash and fear, their eyes reflecting an inexpressible loneliness. They became living ghosts, separated from the community so as not to spread their impurity. This was the psychological drama of banishment, being torn away from the source of life, from the warmth of one's people, from the presence of the covenant. Eliezer, as the high priest, could not simply leave them to die. His mission was twofold: diagnosis and healing. According to the law, he was the only one authorized to decide the fate of the leper. He had to carefully examine the affected area, observe its changes, and bear witness to the movement of the disease, which was often rapid and unpredictable, like a thought. "He who enters here with faith, who endures the exile and repentance, will be cleansed," he proclaimed, leading the sick who had completed the periods of isolation to the sacred waters of the streams. These were no ordinary waters. The water there shone with a clarity like glass, flowing through the secret veins of the Sinai rocks. It was a source of hope, struck from the granite of despair. But healing required a terrible sacrifice and ritual. Eleazar commanded that 2 birds, cedarwood, scarlet thread, and hyssop be brought. 1 bird was to be slaughtered over pure water, and its blood, carrying the curse, mixed with the waters. The second bird, alive, was to be dipped into this mixture of blood and water, and then released into the open field, to carry the curse, released by the community far away from the camp. This was the reenactment of the drama of death and resurrection, separation and return. The people undergoing cleansing splashed the water on their faces. poured it over their bodies and felt the fever and the curse gradually subside. But physical cleansing was only the beginning. They had to go through the ritual again and again, offer sacrifices, wash away the impurity that clung to their clothes, hair, and even the dwelling itself. Their souls were filled not just with peace, but with a deep, hard-won feeling of forgiveness and restoration. This was not merely a medical act. It was the return of a lost soul to the bosom of the community and the presence of God. Section 4. Rituals of cleansing. Immersion in the source of eternity. As evening fell upon the earth, and the camp was enveloped in a mysterious, velvety mantle of night, and the stars ascended like tiny lights in the dark sky, witnesses to all human deeds, it was time for the great rituals of cleansing. This was the moment when a person consciously abandoned their filth to return to their original, pure state. Eleazar, surrounded by a silence thicker than any noise, raised a silver vessel that shimmered in the light of the torches. It was filled not just with water, but with living water, collected from a pure source, infused with sweet herbs, and consecrated with prayers. This vessel concentrated not only physical purity, but also the power of intention, the purity of faith. He who immerses himself in the water of cleansing with a sincere heart will cast away sin and sickness, not only that which manifests on the body, but also that which lurks in the soul, like rust on a sword. The elder proclaimed, his voice solemn, like a funeral bell for the old, sinful self. Only complete immersion in the waters of life can restore the shattered bridge between you and heaven. You must leave your impurity, your fear, and your disappointment there. This ritual of complete immersion, mikveh, was the culmination of the cleansing. It was not just a bath, but a symbolic death and rebirth. The water that completely covered the body symbolized the primeval ocean, the source of all life. Immersion meant returning to a pre-sinful state, to the state of an embryo, to emerge on the surface as a new person, restored and purified. The people lined up, and this line was a cue to destiny, to the renewal of the covenant. Old and young, those who had defiled themselves by touching a dead body, or who had brought impurity from distant journeys, all carefully immersed their hands, faces, and then their whole body, heart, and soul into the sacred waters. They felt the cold water touching their burning conscience, how it penetrated their pores, washing away not only the desert sweat, but also the traces of sinful thoughts. Everyone who emerged from the water did so with a new breath, with a new sight. They felt the burden of fear and suffering leaving their bodies, replaced by a feeling of unspeakable peace and divine presence. Their bodies, having just emerged from the water, were wet and vulnerable, but their souls were strong and protected. They once again became part of the sacred community, worthy of standing before the face of the Lord in their camp. Eleazar stood apart, observing this theater of repentance and revival. He knew the water was only a conductor. True cleansing occurred in the human resolve, in their unshakable intention never to return to filth. The ritual was only the external confirmation of an internal transformation. And each time he saw the clean, radiant face of a person who had just emerged from the waters, he felt that these difficult laws of purity were truly the greatest gift of God, which kept their people afloat in the turbulent sea of life. Section 5. Faith and consequences, the unwavering shield of the Spirit. The night swallowed all sounds, and a silence descended upon the desert, so profound that one could seemingly hear the rotation of the celestial spheres. Eleazar, the tireless guardian of the law, raised his gaze to the stars. They twinkled with absolute, unwavering purity, reminding them of the cosmic order that their people were meant to recreate on earth. His final sermon was not an instruction, but a testament carved into hearts. Remember, children of Israel, and do not forget, the laws of purity are not chains that shackle your freedom, but golden keys that unlock the doors to true life. They are not restrictions, but a gift given to you in mercy, so that you may walk in the presence of the one God and not be consumed. They lead you to the fullness of being, and their violation brings death and suffering, for it returns you to the primal, undivided chaos. He explained that dietary purity was not merely about stomach health, but about the discipline of desires, the ability to say no to instinct, organizing one's life according to the divine pattern. Bodily purity was not just about hygiene, but about reverence for the temple of the Spirit that the Lord had chosen for his dwelling. Ritual cleansing was not magic, but a daily struggle against the darkness in the heart, leading to continuous spiritual renewal. Our enemies think we are weak because we often wash our hands and avoid certain foods. They do not understand that in this lies our unwavering strength. His voice rang out like a victorious cry. Everywhere you are, you carry with you a sacred barrier that separates you from the sinful world. This barrier is your law. As long as you keep it pure, you are invulnerable. When you violate it, you become the prey of impurity. The people listened and finally understood profoundly that these rules were not just physical safety from disease, but a daily, uncompromising battle against sinful inclinations, leading to spiritual purification and internal victory. They felt that these laws transformed their nomadic life into a grand and perpetual act of worship. And so, from generation to generation, these laws of purity, forged in the fire of trials, became a precious, unbroken legacy. They guarded life, granted wisdom, strengthened faith, and fixed the presence of God among the people. They became their unwavering shield, gleaming in the desert sun, reflecting the curse and inviting blessing. The law became the lifeblood of their nation, pulsing in every touch, every piece of bread, every word, reminding them, you are chosen, and your path is the path of purity.